Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of April the 5th. Let me commence with attendance. At this moment, we have two councillors not with us, Councillor Miller, who may join us, Councillor Pierce, who will be joining us around about 7 p.m. is my understanding. Alicia, you've got everything there?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Then let us move on to the agenda. If somebody could move approval of the agenda, noting that we've had additions today in an addendum which adds to items 7.1, 8.2, 12.1 and 13. Moved by Mayor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Gatwood. There was a suggestion we might actually add item 13 to item 12 for consideration. Can we take that as a friendly amendment? We can. Okay. Anybody wish to add any other business? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 3 is declaration of pecuniary interest. If you have any pecuniary interest, if you could flag them at the appropriate time. Item 4, we have no delegations, petitions or presentations at this point. We do have some, which brings us to the adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting of March the 1st. Could I get somebody to move them to get them on the floor? Councillor Howe, seconded by Councillor Ferrier. Do we have any comments, changes required? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Do we have any business arising from the minutes of those meetings? Councillor Chambers.
Yes, under item 12, other business, it alludes to Councillor Gatward's question regarding the industrial lands. And it states that the general manager confirmed that there is information forthcoming. And the questions that Councillor Gatward asked at the time would be answered when the information landed on the table. I'm just wondering, what is the status of the information regarding the industrial lands status?
I see Michael has come online. Leave it to you, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Our plan was to do a bit of an education session with council on employment lands. We're just working through that now, so we would hoping to be doing that. I think likely in attachment to the Administration and Operations Committee meeting later this month. And I think we've got a number of topics we'd like to cover on that. Allison's working through that, a bit of a white paper on it now. It's a pretty big topic and there's some complexity to it. And then some of the recent changes that we're going to be talking about later tonight may influence that. So I think that would be our intent right now. It may be a little more towards the end of the month, but we would hoping to wrap that up this month. So
thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chambers. Yep, good. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Then we'll move on to item 7, which is a public hearing under section 11 of the County of Brant Telecommunications Tower Protocol. Dan, you'll take us through an application or information on an application at 1289 Highway 54, sorry, Highway 54.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. I trust everyone can see that okay, clearly, large enough, or would we like it bigger?
I can't see it, Dan, but that's.
How's that?
Yeah, now we got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as we mentioned, this is an application for a telecommunication tower, CT4 21DN. The applicant is Bell Mobility, and we have our agent with us as well. This is for the property located at 1289 Highway 54. And this item is being presented for information purposes only. The subject lands, as you can see on your screen, are located on the south side of Highway 54. This is in the eastern portion of the county. The subject lands themselves have an area of approximately 2.1 hectares and contain a number of agricultural related structures on the property, with the Grand River located to the south. The property is largely designated agricultural and with some natural heritage along the banks of the river. The zoning bylaw classifies subject lands similar fashion to the official plan, zoned agricultural and zoned natural heritage again to the rear. The proposal is a telecommunications tower. This is a steel lattice tri-pole tower, 90 meters in height, surrounded by a fenced-in compound of approximately 25 by 25 meters. The application consists of a site selection report and a site plan identifying the location of the proposed tower. And I've drawn it just to simplify, with an X on the aerial image there. Where we're at so far, we have had a public information session hosted by the agent, and that was back on January 11th. We've since received some public comments as a result of that meeting back on January 14th, and we've since received more as a result of the circulation ahead of this meeting. So just to note that the proposed tower is located outside of the National Heritage Area or the GRCA regulated area, and no trees or vegetation are proposed to remove. According to the County of Brant protocol, we require a separation distance or a preferred separation distance 3 times the tower height from both natural heritage features and surrounding residential uses. On the screen, I've identified a blue circle, which is the preferred distance, being 3 times the tower height, and a yellow dashed circle that identifies the proximity to the closest residence, being on the north side of Highway 54. Through the public comments received, our agent has been working to provide responses to those residents, and I believe some of that correspondence is included in the package for committee's consideration. Moving forward, we'll continue to receive comments from both staff and address the comments received from the public. We'll continue to work with the applicant to perhaps find a location that better meets the protocol. The County Brant Telecommunication protocol as it relates to the preferred distances to sensitive land uses. There will be a future public hearing where further notice will be given to the members of the public and a formal recommendation will be made at a later date. At this point in time, happy to answer any questions, and I know our agent is with us this evening to provide a presentation of her own.
Thank you, Dan. Does committee have any questions of Dan? Seeing none, then we'll move on to the agent, which I think is Valerie Patel. If you could introduce yourself and then give your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie, and I'm a planner at Frontier International, representing Bell Mobility's interest in the proposed telecommunication tower at 1289 Brant County Highway 54. I also have my colleague Brendan here with me today. So tonight we will be providing a brief summary of how the public consultation process went, Transport Canada's lighting requirements, some photo simulations of the proposed tower, before and after coverage plots, and we'd be happy to answer any questions too. So we had our public consultation period started on December 9th. 2021 and went till January 11th, 2022, a total of 33 days. No members of the public showed up to our virtual meeting on January 11th, but we did receive emails from one member of the public who represented themselves and a few other properties, both ownership and rental. Through our notification process, there was a slight administrative error regarding the lighting, and we would like to apologize again for that error that was made in the brochure. The planner was notified right away, and it was corrected for their second round of public consultation. So Transport Canada has determined that both day and night protection will be required. This is regulated at the federal level and is non-negotiable for aeronautical safety. Since the public consultation has ended, I have reached out to Transport Canada for more details of what specifically will be required, but I have not heard back from them yet. So far, what I can say is medium intensity lighting will be required at the mid and top level of the proposed tower. So of the first two images here. In addition to contacting Transport Canada, I have also reached out to Bell's contractor who handles the lighting for these towers. The company's name is Dialight, and they have a variety of friendly optic lighting systems that help reduce the scatter of light that reaches the ground. They, as you can see from the images here, their lighting faces upwards towards the sky for so airplanes can see it, and they have a blocking band underneath it to stop lighting from going downwards. They also use reflectors to reduce the scattering effect, and they have provided me the statistic that they tilt their lighting -3 degrees upwards, and that reduces the light scatter by 92%. I would just like to say that I'm not an expert regarding lighting, but I wanted to bring forward as much information as I can, as it's not common knowledge. Here's just the photo simulation from Highway 54 looking south to give a better idea of what the tower will look like. And here is another photo simulation from the same view, just slightly south, shifted. Here's a map of the current telecommunication area. Looking at, this red area here is the property that are, and the Rogers Towers, the Rogers Towers are located 5 kilometers, 8.6 kilometers away. The Bell Towers from left to right are about 6.4 kilometers, 8.2 kilometers, and 8.6 kilometers away. We're also aware of the tower application at Baptist Church Road and Brant Road 22, which is about 4.56 kilometers away from our site. And we're also aware of the Tourist Center Tower, which is about 3.27 kilometers away. And both those towers are out of Bell's search range. Here is a coverage map, a plot showing what the area, what Bell's coverage looks like before our tower. And this is what the improved coverage would look like. We understand that according to the protocol, we are out of the radius for 3 times the tower height, and we understand this type of infrastructure is not the most attractive and appealing, but at the end of the day, it does need to be placed somewhere. So thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Valerie. If you could return us to the full screen.
Sure.
Thank you. Does committee have questions of Valerie? Failing that, I do have one question. You showed both the Bell and the Rogers towers on that drawing a couple of slides back. If you're filling a gap in your coverage, does that mean Rogers are likely to fill a gap in their coverage, which would be close to the tower that you're proposing, or are you able facility being Bell and Rogers?
At this moment in time, I'm only representing Bell, so I cannot speak on what Rogers, what their coverage needs are, or what their RF mapping is saying. But I am not aware of any Rogers sites.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no further questions of Valerie, then I'd like to open this item up to the public. Alicia, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on this matter?
We do, Mr. Chairman. We have an Allison McBlain who is registered to speak.
Okay, if Alison could show herself. Alison, welcome. Good evening to you. If you could just introduce yourself by giving your full name and address, and then you can make your commentary.
Good. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Allison McBlain. I live at 1302 Highway 54. My husband and I purchased this property. It was his childhood home, and we purchased it from his parents 6 years ago. And we live here with our 3 kids and run our business off our property here. Firstly, I'd like to make it clear that I really would have loved to attend and comment at the initial public consultation in January if all of that relevant information had been conveyed in the brochure that we had received in the mail. And I know Valerie has apologized for that. It's not that I object to the need of this tower. I do, however, have concerns with the impact or those slight inconveniences, which a term Bell has used on my family. Our original brochure didn't state the need for that high visibility paint or the flashing or the lights used on the tower. And what is concerning to me is once Bell became aware of those omissions of information, they didn't really rectify that situation, but instead relied on another community member to pass along that information to all the affected parties, which really doesn't inspire confidence in this project and what's happening here. And I completely understand that due to the proximity of the airport, we need to have those lights there, but that puts into question why it needs to be located so close to other homes. Again, Valerie just alluded to that in our about the distance in her talk here. But when they were asked in an email about what that minimum distance was between tower and residents and why they were non-compliant with those bylaws, that question wasn't answered at the time. So again, let's helping us, or let's making it feel like we can't have trust in what's going on in this situation here. Interestingly enough, they did acknowledge that that lighting will cause a minor inconvenience for our family. And my question is what is that minor inconvenience? What is considered a minor inconvenience? As a teacher and a mom of 3 kids, ages 5, 3, and 1, 2 of which that have bedrooms that are going to be facing that new tower with its lights, I have concerns with the quality of sleep, with the flashing light coming into their rooms all night long, especially in these key developmental years where sleep is very important. And having to purchase new window coverings for their rooms, my room, potentially other ones in our home is a very time-consuming and expensive endeavor. And it's quite honestly not a minor inconvenience for us. Finally, although Bell has made it clear that there's no health implications of being in proximity to one of these telecommunication towers because they follow the guidelines put out by the Safety Code 6 by the government, as a parent of small children, I still do have concerns. 5G is a newer technology, and all the reading and research that I've been doing around this, I haven't found enough evidence on bias studies that confidently make me believe that it's safe or unsafe for my family. There's just a lot of unknowns. These are kind of the things that we've been talking about as a family, and I really appreciate that you were allowing me to speak tonight and share those concerns with you. I'm thankful for Valerie for giving us a little bit more deeper information into the lighting that's going to be used, but it's still a concern for us.
Thank you, Alison. Valerie, do you want to reply directly, or do you want to save it for when you come back with a formal recommendation?
You mean the formal recommendation?
This is for information and for Alison's benefit. This is an information gathering session, so this is not a decision making or an approval session on our part. So Some of these questions may take some time to answer or to your satisfaction, but if Valerie wants to do it now, that's fine. Otherwise, Alison, thank you for your input. We do appreciate it. Alicia, do we have anybody else that wishes to speak?
I do not have any other members of the public registered to speak on this item.
Thank you. Well, I will ask a second time in case somebody's on the line that wishes to speak. And I'll ask a third time. And hearing or seeing nobody, I will close the public part of this item and pass the matter back to committee to make a recommendation. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to receive.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Bailey, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Chambers?
Just, Mr. Chairman, just for the record and perhaps for Alison's benefit, I'm just wondering if staff can outline the jurisdictional matters that the county deals with in essence of approvals, et cetera, what the role of the municipality is in these things as it relates to approvals, as you suggested.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Coleman. Councillor Chambers, good suggestion. Would Dan like to try that?
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, just my understanding of the process is it is atypical then, or in comparison to an approval or a bylaw or a planning application. The towers are highly regulated by, as Councillor Chambers mentioned, other jurisdictions, and the protocol created is a preferred protocol that not all municipalities have, but it's something that the county councilors have established over the last few years as we've seen more towers come to the county, and they're not providing an approval. It's simply an endorsement or kind of a yay or nay, a nod, if you will, to yes, it meets the protocol, or no, it doesn't. And that is a small piece to the puzzle in the overall approval by another governing body. So the approval or refusal or acceptance of a location does not necessarily mean that it would be shut down at this level. It's simply a small piece to the puzzle that is considered by others as part of the required process. The nice thing that our county councilors have done is incorporated a very in-depth public consultation process with lots of opportunity for comments and information, and this is one of those steps.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor Chambers, you think that's a sufficient answer?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman. And
Then I'll call the vote. All those in favour of receiving for information? Valerie, thank you very much indeed. Look forward to seeing you back in the future.
Thank you.
Moving right along, item 8 are public hearings under the Planning Act to receive information from the public. And we have 2 items this evening. First one is in regard of 982 Rest Acres Road. And Dan, you're on the floor again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a presentation of a Plano subdivision application and a zoning bylaw amendment application for 982 Rest Acres Road. The agent is Dave Aston from MHBC Planning on behalf of the owner of Vicano Development, and this application is being presented for information purposes only. The subject lands are located as identified on the screen, outlined in red, north of the Highway 403, west of Rest Acres Road, and south of Powerline Road. The property is approximately 32.9 hectares. The official plan designation identifies this property as designated as an employment area with a small portion of natural heritage towards the frontage of Powerline Road. The intent of the employment areas are to develop or to be developed for light, heavy, and prestige industrial uses with limited service, commercial, and related uses. The official plan designation as it relates to this property is included in two site-specific policy areas. One, policy area 12, which permits additional uses compatible to industrial uses. This relates to format warehouse, commercial, and retail components. And also in our current official plan, we have site-specific policy area 16, which is part of our Green Energy Accord, which encourages the establishment of green energy technology along the 403 corridor. The current zoning on the subject lands is agricultural, and with the natural heritage zone, again, a small green blob there along the frontage of Powerline Road. The surrounding zoning classifications is a good mix of light, heavy industrial, general mixed-use commercial, and residential uses. The proposal, as I mentioned, two parts. The first is the plan of subdivision application, which proposes to create individual development blocks and a municipal road to allow for the development of employment uses. Now, I realized when I was looking at the agenda with the link provided that these colors, the red, blue, and the green, are solid. The transparency didn't come through, but I've made sure I've pulled the right presentation for you guys this evening, so you can, it's a little bit better reflected of what's being proposed. So we have the red area is a block that would be dedicated to commercial uses. We have Street A, which is the proposed street. The blue area is a block that would be dedicated to employment or industrial uses. And the green area would be dedicated to stormwater management facility and access to that stormwater management. The proposal related to the zoning proposes to rezone the subject lands from agricultural to natural heritage to an open space 1 zone. Sorry, let me restart that one. The application proposes to rezone the agricultural, natural heritage, and open space zone to site-specific zoning related to light industrial uses with exceptions. So the proposal of the proposed uses for the area in the red are anything from a bakery, florist shop, financial institutions, grocery store, pharmacy, home improvement centers, restaurant uses, a wide range, and use that would be prohibited in the site-specific zoning would include auto body shop, automobile repair garage, and a cannabis production and processing. And it's just important to note that any commercial uses within that red area would be subject to the setbacks and coverage and landscaping typical of a commercial zone. The area in blue would be rezoned to an industrial M2 zone. And in addition to the permitted uses in the M2 zone, parking reduction for warehouse uses is being requested. And the green area would be rezoned from agricultural to that open space 1 zone to accommodate and permit a stormwater management pond as a permitted use. So I've flipped the image on its side just so I could fit it better on the screen, but the highway is now to the right side of your screen. Rest Acres Road is now on the top and Powerline Road on the left side. This is a very conceptual layout of how development could occur on these blocks. It's important to note that the specific development of these blocks would be facilitated through future site plan control applications. So as part of the proposal, we have a laundry list of submission documents or documents that were submitted as part of the application. These include a planning justification, master plan of the development, archaeological assessment, environmental impact study and report, legal surveys, geotechnical investigation. All this list of submission materials are currently being reviewed by staff And we're currently receiving comments, which we will share with the applicant over the next few weeks. So as I mentioned, next steps, we're continuing to receive that information and we will discuss the comments with the applicant. And we will look to finalize the proposal where further notice of future public hearing will be provided to residents and a formal recommendation presented to council and committee. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Does committee have any questions of Dan? Councillor Chambers.
Just, I'm wondering if Dan could just comment on the water tower block.
I can. I will. I'll just bring that up on the screen so I can identify the location. It is important to note this image identifies the asterisk, the star. This is a block that the county has purchased to establish a location for a new water tower.
Can you return us back then? That's sufficient, Councillor Chambers? No. Any other questions for Dan? Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions, 3 to Dan. Street A, is that the municipal street or road? I'm guessing.
That is correct.
Is the distance, do you know, between that street and the next roundabout there at the Brant Sports Complex? Do we know if there's sufficient space? Because it looks a little bit tight, and I know we got to have a certain distance. Or is that a premature question?
It's through Mr. Chair. Certainly premature as far as my expertise. Again, we're working with our operations staff and engineering staff who would review the distance between the roundabouts and making sure it meets all the technical studies. We're also working with MTO as it does fall within their
Because,
the MTO review corridor.
Okay, because from what I see, that where that street goes is dependent on how it's zoned, right? MSXX1 versus MSXX2, and I got to assume that the guys know what they're doing, and there's a reason that one block is a certain size and the other block is a certain size. So yeah, I'd be interested to know. Somebody will look at that, I'm sure. Last question: the stormwater management fund. Where did, like I see, it's abutting kind of the 403. Where does that drain under? I'm just trying to think. Is there drainage underneath the rest acres?
That's a great question that I do not have the answer for at the moment, but certainly I can reach out to our operations staff and follow up.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure you'll look after it and not let the province worry about that. Okay, I'll look forward to those answers. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Any other questions to Dan? Councillor Gatwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Dan. Dan, once this is finished and it's been through the planning process, and do you know how soon the developer wishes to start building on this site?
Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gower, I don't have timelines as to when construction or if they have tenants or when they wish to start construction. It's always sooner than later, but we do have Mr. Aston with us representing the applicant, and perhaps he has more information for you.
Thank you.
Dan, I have one quick question. You said originally this area was an SSPA and it was in relation to green energy. Does that mean we're dropping any thoughts of green energy activity at these sites?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess I have to take a look at the details of the green energy accord that was established previous. It's not something that I've had much experience reviewing with these applications in this area, but certainly we could take a closer look to make sure that the intent is being maintained.
Thank you, Dan. If there are no further questions for Dan, then I'll move on. Thank you, Dan. We'll move on to the applicant or the agent of the applicant. I think it's Dave Aston. Dave, good evening. I think we know you, so we don't need the introduction, but you go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, Chair Bell, members of committee. I don't have a formal presentation this evening. I knew Dan would cover off all of the details in his presentation of what I would say a straightforward application. We're looking to put into place zoning to implement the official plan designation of industrial and the site-specific policy area that allows for consideration of commercial uses on the site. So that's why you see a block of commercial between Street A and at the intersection with Rest Acres, and then an industrial block. What I'd point out is the way that we've structured the zoning is that the lands there is flexibility that the lands could be fully developed with industrial and a smaller portion of commercial. So we're providing some flexibility there to respond to the market, whether there's commercial need or could be industrial need, which, as you all know, is really being driven by the market lately as far as demand for lands. I thought I'd just respond to maybe a couple of the questions. I took some notes here. With regard to Street A, the public street, the location of Street A is at the roundabout that was identified through the Class EA. So we are proposing that road connection to a roundabout that was defined through a process already. And so we've had discussion with county staff on that. The ultimate design of how the street connects into the roundabout will be a detail, but the actual location is in a location that was assessed through the EA. The stormwater management, there's two components to it. There's an infiltration component, and then there's an emergency outlet that would be along a ditch along the highway corridor. And we've had early discussions with MTO staff as to the design of the pond, location of the pond, and the emergency outlet. So again, those would be details that would be addressed as conditions with county and MTO staff, but we have had initial discussions and understanding that this is the approach. Timing. I know our client has been receiving calls daily, maybe a couple times a day, on bringing the lands to market. So our timing would be to get through zoning and plan a subdivision as quickly as feasibly possible. We've initiated discussions with staff on site plan for the industrial portion to make sure that approvals are lining up so that we could respond to interests that are already in the market. So we appreciate the work that staff have been doing. They've been very accessible, responding to comments and meeting with us to work through this process. And we're looking forward to working with them to address comments that are received through the circulation and ultimately to get to conditions of approval for the plan of subdivision and move this forward to get the investment in the ground and jobs in the county.
Okay, thank you. Does committee have any questions of Dave? Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to Dave. It was interesting to me to hear the Green Energy Accord brought up. I'm just wondering if you, Dave, are familiar with what that is and if anything, what impact that may have. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, the Green Energy Accord is an agreement between the county and the Six Nations.
Through Mr. Chair, yes, and we'll continue our discussions with staff on how that is implemented through the process. And we have received comments, and so we'll be working with staff to address those as well. I think that's the best that I could respond at this point.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you, committee. Seeing no further questions, and I'm going to open this issue up to the public. Alicia, do we have anybody that wishes to speak to this matter?
We do, Mr. Chairman. We have a Mark Neary who is registered to speak.
Okay, thank you. Mark, if you could show yourself on screen and introduce yourself and give us your address, and then you can give us your commentary. Alicia, is Mark online, do you know?
I do not see him online right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, then I think we will move along. Is there anybody else online that would like to speak to this matter? This is the second time of asking. Hearing none, I'll ask a third and final time. Hearing none, seeing none, I will close this part of the matter to the public and pass the matter back to committee. And welcome to Councillor Pearce. What would committee like to do on this? Councillor Miller?
Well, I'll move to receive it and refer it back to staff for further analysis.
Do I have a seconder? Mayor Bailey, thank you very much. Any further commentary on this matter? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Dan, you're back again on item 8.2 in regard of 226 Burford Delhi Town Line Road. So over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will pull up the presentation. And this is a zoning bylaw amendment application for 226 Burford Delhi Town Line Road. And our agent is with us this evening, represented from JH Cahoon Engineering. And this item is being presented for information purposes only. So the subject lands are located just on the outskirts of the Kelvin settlement area. A portion of the subject lands are located within. The subject lands have a total area of 4 hectares and contain an existing dwelling, a temporary or garden suite dwelling, and a structures associated with an automotive repair garage. The designation in our current official plan identifies that a portion of the subject lands, as I mentioned, are located within the settlement area of Kelvin. This is the orange area. The area outside of the orange area is designated as agricultural. The zoning identifies a band of natural heritage, which is a result of the presence of a water course. This area is zoned natural heritage. The subject lands have a site-specific zoning on the property, which is an A-23, and this reflects permitted uses to permit the automobile repair garage and limited sales. We also have a temporary zoning T-82 to permit a garden suite, which expires in 2024. The proposal is for the zoning bylaw amendment application is in 2 parts. One is to change the zoning on a portion of the subject lands that are located within the hamlet and village of Kelvin from agricultural, or that A-23, and T-82 to residential hamlet zone. And this is to permit further residential development. The second portion is to modify the agricultural special exception, or that A-23 zone, to also permit a lot area of 3.1 hectares and a frontage of 31 meters. And this is because the property, that portion of the property is zoned agricultural and it is currently an undersized farm parcel, but the area is being reduced further. So as part of this application, we will recognize the reduced area to remain. I will note that as part of this application, there is a 30-meter setback required from the watercourse. So we are proposing that the zoning mapping be modified or updated to reflect the increased buffer from the natural heritage feature. This image is a concept plan of what future lot creation within the hamlet could look like. This is creating 3 new residential parcels and how that 30-meter natural heritage setback may be applied. As it relates to the temporary dwelling or the garden suite, the applicants do have some options. The temporary zoning for the garden suite does expire in 2024. As I mentioned, they may choose to leave that dwelling in place on one of the severed lots or remove the garden suite once it expires. So similar to previous information meetings, we're continuing to receive comments, technical comments from the public. I should note that there were some comments included in our addendum this evening that I had a chance to review today, and I'll be happy to provide a response to that resident through a phone call or email. I can do that tomorrow. Having just seen those comments today, haven't had that chance to respond. We will provide further notice to members of the public for the future public hearing. Staff will prepare a formal report and recommendation and present it to committee for a decision. Happy to answer any questions.
Dan, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that commentary about the comment from the public that you received today. Appreciate that you're going to go back to them directly. Thank you. Does committee have any questions for Dan? Councillor Gatwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Dan. Yes, I read the letter from the resident or the email, and his address was blocked out. I believe it's probably because of privacy legislation, although planning applications are public. The address of this is 226 Burford Delhi Town Line Road. So since we don't have the address, can you tell us where the applicant is on the map in relationship to these proposed 3 lots?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am in the same boat as you. I do not know the address from which the resident resides, so I will have to do some digging myself to review whether or not we have the original email with that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dan? Councillor Miller.
Oh, well, one question to start off, because Alicia's on, I see. Maybe she could address that question that Councillor Gatwood had, because I had the same question. If somebody comes and speaks to an application, you ask them their address, their name. Is it the same with a letter writer?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. So when we're preparing the agenda component, you're absolutely correct. There is a public component. However, we do try to limit what it is that we put out on the internet. So we do remove anything that people could use as an identifier. We do have that information, and it will be included within the minutes as commentary, but just in an effort for privacy reasons to maintain information that other people might use for not planning purposes. We do redact a lot of information, which we do have. However, we do have the address, and it will be included in the minutes as part of the public planning process.
Good answer for you, Councillor Miller.
Yes, no, I'll just go with the other 2 questions, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dan. Dan, it looks like, but I don't want to assume, but it looks like these 3 lots are contiguous with the existing houses, existing development, yes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay, and my last question, have you done your homework as far as MDS goes? Or will that be something you do later? Because if I read that letter writers, if I understand the letter writers letter properly, what they were saying is they don't have livestock yet. I think it's something that they were looking at, but are there any existing livestock operations that would impact this as far as MDS goes?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of MDS and how it applies in this situation or doesn't apply, The subject lands proposed, the area proposed for new lot creation is located within a settlement boundary. Therefore, MDS is not applicable in this situation.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I was just testing you on that one. Thanks.
Thanks for the education to both of you. Thank you, Dan. If there are no further questions for Dan, then I'll move on to the applicant or the agent of the applicant. I think Bob Phillips is representing the applicant this evening.
I'm, yes, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Bailey, members of committee. I'm here tonight with Mr. Johnson, who's the owner of the land, who's also on the line. But yes, this is an application to rezone some agricultural land that is within the hamlet designation. And it's to facilitate severances, 3 severances in the future. And I'm just here to answer any questions that the committee might have tonight.
Thank you, Bob. Does the committee have any questions for Bob? Seeing none, thank you, Bob. You just hang around for a little while longer. Can I open the matter then up to the public? Alicia, do we have anybody from the public that wishes to speak?
I do not have anyone registered to speak on this item.
Thank you, but I will ask a second time online here. And again, a third and final time. Seeing none, hearing none, I'll close the public part of this item and pass the matter back to committee for a decision on how to move forward. Councillor Pearce?
Move to receive, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Gatwood, thank you very much. Any further questions or commentary? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Rick. You know how it goes from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to item 9, which are public hearings under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. And we have one item in regard of 301 County Road 18. And Ryan, you're leading us on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Okay, and this is with respect to application ZBA 4621 RC, IBI Group on behalf of Sherman Richardson, the owner of 301 County Road 18. The subject lands are located on the west side of County Road 18, south of Canesville, south of Highway 54, in the county of Brant. The subject lands have a frontage of approximately 378 meters along County Road 18 and an area of approximately 11 hectares. Currently, the subject lands contain a single detached dwelling, detached garage, and a storage building. The portion of the subject lands that is being proposed to be rezoned and also severed for a single lot, that portion of the lands are designated in the official plan as rural residential and national heritage, and are currently zoned as agricultural A and natural heritage. The applicant is proposing to rezone a portion of the subject lands from agricultural A to rural residential RR with a special exception to require a minimum rear yard setback of 75 meters for a dwelling. And this is based on some information we just recently received from a slope stability report. And I apologize, I was hoping to get this on the addendum, but we were working these last details out as late as this afternoon. And so you'll have to forgive me here, but I do want to add, and we also have where we are in agreement with the developer to have a site-specific 75-meter setback applied for a dwelling for the future lot to be rezoned. And this is to align the zoning with the recommendations of the slope stability report prepared by Englobe, recommending that the future residence be constructed sort of aligned with the existing setbacks of the dwellings along County Road 18 that has already been established. And this is to recognize some slope stability natural hazards related to the rear of this property backing onto the river. And so again, just to be clear, the intent is to rezone the front portion of the subject land from agricultural A to rural residential with a special exception, which we will certainly update for the bylaw at council later this month, with a 75-meter rear yard setback for a dwelling. In addition, this would be the zoning schedule as well, which would only rezone a portion of the lands that are zoned as agricultural A to rural residential and would maintain the entirety of the natural heritage at the rear, which would also limit development at the rear of the property. And that's consistent with what you'd see in 307 to about 311 here, these rural residential lots as well to the north that were recently developed through severances. I believe we have Christian and Douglas from IBI available to answer any questions and to speak to this application. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. And again, I apologize for the last minute addition here, but we wanted to be sure that we had all the environmental constraints addressed.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate your contribution. Does anybody from committee have a question of Ryan? Seeing none, Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do you know what year, through you, Mr. Chair, do you know when the other severances were done, the neighbors, the three that are on the, are they recently severed or have they been there for a long time?
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I know that there were several lots severed, or at least dwellings constructed to the north in the last probably I'd say 10 years, but I believe that the ones directly adjacent to the north might be a little bit older. But the intent, I guess, is what I meant to say is that the zoning here and the limits of development would match what's existing to the north with a fairly large cluster of rural residential lots there. And that's really to identify some slope stability issues at the rear backing onto the Grand River. And that's why we're not proposing to rezone the entire area that will be severed. Although it does look like a manicured lawn, there are some slope stability issues there that have been identified in the report that was submitted. And we were working on that this afternoon.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, then I will open it up to the applicant or the agents of the applicant. I see we have both Christian and Douglas this evening. I don't know which of you is going to speak, but over to you.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to be speaking tonight. We don't have a formal presentation. I think Ryan clarified everything as well as the changes, and we would just like to say that we support the recommendation for approval based on the staff report that was prepared. So, thank you.
Thank you. Very concise. Appreciate that. Committee, do we have any questions for Christian or for Douglas? Seeing none, thank you. Then I'll open this matter up to the public. Alicia, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak this evening?
I do not have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
Thank you. But I will ask a second time for the sake of clarity in this meeting. And I'll ask a third and final time. Hearing none, seeing none, I'll close the public part of the meeting and pass the matter back to committee for recommendation. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Still move the recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gatwood, thank you. Any further questions or commentary on this before I call the vote? Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 114, which contains the bylaw, Heather Boyd is listed as the clerk. That's probably a typographical error, and it should be Alicia Dijak listed as clerk.
Thank you for spotting that, Councillor Weed. I'm sure Alicia will put that right. Okay, if there are no further commentary, then I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Christian, Douglas, this matter will be taken to council at the end of this month for ratification. Thank you very much for your contribution this evening. Thank you to all of our planners. That brings us to item 10, which are consent items, of which there are none. Item 11 is a committee report from the Agricultural Advisory Committee. Would somebody like to move that on for receiving for information? Mayor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Howes. Any questions, comments to that report? Seeing none, I'll call the vote to receive for information. Motion carried. That brings us to staff reports, and we have Jen Boyer to talk us through the proposed provincial legislative changes under the proposed legislation, More Homes for Everybody, or Everyone rather, 2022. Jen, over to you. I do believe you've got a few slides as well you might want to show us.
All right, thank you, Chair Bell, and thank you, members of committee and Mayor Billy. So as you see, you've probably seen in the news of the More Homes for Everyone Act. It's been basically top headlines in provincial news this week. So what ended up happening is we saw this through the news feed on Wednesday afternoon last week. So we just threw something together very quickly to get on the agenda tonight because it's very important. And we do have a very limited time, which is very typical of this provincial government, to respond. So quickly, I actually was able to throw a report together in basically an hour on Thursday morning. So that's why it's very brief. But I do just have a few slides. I'll take just a couple of minutes just to give you a quick overview, because the legislation package, the actual plan itself, there's a lot buried. It took actually a couple hours to go through everything that's being proposed. And besides that press release, you've probably also seen in the news that afternoon, last Wednesday, Premier Ford with Minister Clark of Municipal Affairs hosted a fireside chat with the real estate industry as they were announcing the press release, which they talked about these new plan and proposals for legislation. That same afternoon, we got we didn't attach it to this agenda, but it was from the Home Builders, Ontario Home Builders Association. They also put out a press release within an hour of the provincial release. So you can see who had notice in advance. Municipalities were not notified in advance of this proposal. So there was an addendum issued today. You can see the letter from the Deputy Minister of MMAH. It doesn't have the time stamp on it, but we got that letter on last Thursday, March 31st at 4:54 p.m. So you can just see the timing of how everything has rolled out in the last few weeks, meaning that municipalities sort of have been left a bit late to be notified of these provincial changes. So, so I'll just quickly run through a few things. There's a lot that was attached, and it's more about just its information. I don't have a lot of answers tonight. Pam and I actually had a call with municipal affairs staff yesterday. They didn't really provide a lot of details, but it was more about what are we going to do about our official plan, which we can either talk later about, or we can provide more information of where we want to go. So just a few slides quickly, and I'll share what we know about this so far. So I'll just share my screen. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes, Jen, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So actually, as the most interesting thing is 3 years ago, about at this time, I started April 2019 at the county, and May 2019, if you remember back, was Bill 108. So this is Bill 109. So Bill 108 was More Homes, More Choice. And then the growth plan preceded that in May 2019. So the interesting thing is that it's following the exact same process as what the province did in 2019. There was a plan, there were legislative changes with the More Homes, More Choice Act, and then there was a slew of regulatory changes with legislation, and then policy changes, which took the growth plan and then other things. They're following the same process here. So it's very convoluted, where it's the More Homes for Everyone plan, which is implementing some of the task force recommendations, which I presented on March 1st. And we knew something was coming, we just didn't know when. The next thing is that there's the actual legislative changes, which is the More Homes, or the More Homes for Everyone Act, which is the legislative changes. And there's 5 major pieces of legislation that they're changing, which is including the Planning Act, which has major implications. The next piece there's policy proposals, which are these rural northern municipality questions. And then also this missing middle attainability strategies, and this multi-generational policy proposals, which would be implemented probably further down the road. And if you've also seen in the news with a lot of these articles about what's going on, is that the big sort of nasty pieces out of the Housing Affordability Act or the task force report didn't make it into this, because I think they're just too politically charged, such as, you know, limiting public consultation, changes to the Heritage Act, a lot of issues to do with zoning. That didn't make it in here because it is very controversial, even though that this is quite controversial. So you've also probably seen that they've increased the foreign buyers tax to 20%. They're putting more funding into the Ontario Land Tribunal. I mean, this is all pre-election items that we're doing. So a lot of these changes are just, they're focusing on a lot of the things that were in the More Homes, More Choice of May 2019. But what the province is saying is, hey, municipalities, you haven't used our tools. So we're going to put more tools on you. And we're going to change things so we make you do certain things. Which if you think about the pendulum, if you've been in this business for a while and you've been a municipal councillor, the pendulum swings back and forth with more regulation, less red tape, and they try to change things. But in the end, are they achieving their goal? So in terms of what's proposed to change, you'll note a few things that I wrote in the report. The biggest thing for us are changes to the Planning Act, which is section 17, which changes the powers for a minister to approve an official plan. So what they can do is, with this proposal, is the minister can say, hey, you know what? I'm not making a decision on this. I'm going to send it straight to the Ontario Land Tribunal and make them decide. So that is a proposal, and it's only when a council adopts a final OP where our draft sits as something different, and we still have not had an answer on that on our draft. So those are some of the major things, and they're also trying to look at different things to increase housing supply, but it's really focusing on the real estate industry, getting that supply. It's some of those same things about, you know, increasing density. They're saying zoning tools aren't being used, but a lot of it is geared with the larger municipalities with mass transit. But they are looking at counties like ourselves and the growth plan and beyond, because it is a provincial plan. It's not just for the Golden Horseshoe. So the biggest thing is, do we even get a say, and will they listen? It's very clear that municipalities are being sort of leapfrogged over a lot of these initiatives, but they are asking for feedback. And to be honest, a lot of our civ is through MMH London, the actual staff who report up. But there are some things we do have till April 29th to comment. So it's up to, if the council would like to make comments or through staff, we'd be more than happy to do that. So the biggest thing is we can comment on those changes to the Planning Act through the regulatory proposal. We can comment on the Development Charges Act changes, which has to do with community benefit charges. We can also comment on the rural and northern municipalities proposals. There's some decent questions in there that actually do need answering. And also in terms of increasing this missing middle and gentle density, they call it. But the biggest thing is, I've attached it to the clerk says I've attached it to the addendum, but there's also the actual consultation summary. It's called this Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator Guideline. The guideline is attached to the addendum tonight, if you'd like to have a read for this, because I think this is actually what may happen in terms of planning, because the minister can pull sort of decisions, they can make decisions, but it's also a municipal tool as well if they have to use it. So there's issues like that. So a lot of these things were provided in May 2019, but as the province has indicated and Premier Ford, it's like, we've given you tools, you haven't used them, the housing supply has not increased, prices still are going up, but is this the fix? You know, we know that the housing affordability, it's a worldwide issue, it's national, it's provincial, it's municipal, it's not easy. So this is their proposal to try to deal with that before the election. So I guess, what does this mean for us? As I said, we don't have many answers right now, but I mean, some of the writing's on the wall. It's obviously a pre-election compromise, I think the word is at this point. And in terms of they want to stop the clock on certain things to streamline processes, they want to give refunds if municipalities don't meet their timeframes. And in terms of, again, the pendulum of more or less leadership in terms of planning, who has power over decision-making with development. And then the biggest thing is this a collaborative effort, or is it finger pointing of who's sort of going to fix in terms of the housing affordability? So, but I guess next steps, we are still forging ahead. We are still working in the background on the official plan. It's not on pause at all. There's still a lot of work to do and comments to work through. Wow, we still get submissions every day that we're working through. It's an election year, and if you look at the time frame of actually when the comments are ending at this period, April 29th, the writ is dropping the next week on the 4th. So it's very close, and the next 4 weeks are actually very critical in terms of anything that's going to happen at the provincial level. So that is actually the presentation. So I'd be happy if there's any feedback, but as I said, it's just for information. I don't have a lot of answers at this time, but if you're welcome, I'll turn it over to Chair Bell.
Thank you, Jen, for throwing up the highlights there. I'm going to take comments from, first of all, Mayor Bailey, then Councillor Howes.
Well, thank you, Jen, for presenting it the way you have. You haven't sugarcoated it, or you really have said the way it is and how you feel. And after we scrape Councillor Bell off the ceiling, my recommendation would be that we have staff reply, just because I think they handle the day-to-day trials and tribulations of these new rules and regulations, knowing that it is an election year and this is exactly what they're doing before May the 4th. So my recommendation would be to have staff reply, seeking others to comment.
Before we go to Councillor Howes, any comments on what the Mayor has suggested? I just have one comment, Mayor, and that would be how do we as a council leverage AMO and Roma and OSAM in this? Because we're not on our own in this one. Is there a role there that is not really a staff role, but a council role that perhaps is through you to write to AMO, OSAM, and so on?
I think what we should do, I mean, we can always do that, but we are just what we are, the County of Brant. I think if we got on the wire real quick and got other people, maybe through SCORE and other places, to get 2 or 3 or 6 municipalities that surround us. SCORE is the one that comes to mind quickly because we have a very active staff there, and we could put something together, I think, through SCORE. Maybe Councillor Chambers could help me with that and see if that could be a possibility quickly, whether we could turn that around.
Councillor Chambers is nodding, so we'll take that as a plus. Thank you. We'll go on then to Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jen. And even before I start asking questions of Jen, I support what the Mayor is saying. Whatever will give us the most weight in our response on this, I'm all for it. But Jen, I've read the articles and I've seen the headlines, and so have people that live in our community, and people don't necessarily read between all of the lines as we do. Some people will read the headlines and say, oh, they're going to, if there's more supply of housing, maybe the prices will become more reasonable, and I can understand where they would see that. But other people will also look at it and say, our municipalities are growing fast already. We've been very open about the fact that we have 30 years worth of growth already in our pipeline to hit the significant numbers of growth that the province had been previously requiring of us. So my questions for you are, like, when I read through this and when I discuss it with constituents, the biggest reaction I have is that it seems like a recipe for building expensive houses faster. It does not seem like a recipe for creating modest homes, affordable homes, attainable homes. Am I missing something in reading this so far? That's one of my questions. The other part is we're required to submit a new official plan, and you and your team and everybody else spent a lot of time on it, and it's frankly frustrating, and you could say offensive, that we submitted it on time. I think we were one of the first municipalities to get ours submitted, and weeks and weeks and weeks have gone by with no response to our plan for our municipality. Meanwhile, the province's plans for our municipality are launching, you know, every week or so with their plans. But if what I guess a specific question in addition to the previous one, if May 4th comes and we don't have a response to our official plan, what happens then?
Through Chair Bell to Councillor House. So I'll just, first of all, I'll talk about the proposal in terms of the actual housing supply. There seems to be an emphasis on single detached. That seems to be the emphasis in terms of single units, but the province has put out proposals, and this is what they said about the toolbox. And our new OP does have a lot of this already as a toolbox, and that's what they're talking about, this missing middle, gentle density, in terms of different models, in terms of attainability at price points. So it's not just about the actual amount of houses built, it's the type, it's the actual housing.
Point of order. Point of order. I think we need to pause due to the recording.
Alicia, can we get the recording back on?
If I could just have a moment, Mr. Chairman, I have reached out to IT to see if we have stopped streaming. I do not have a response yet. If you could perhaps call a 5-minute recess and we can sort out whether or not we have indeed lost the public.
Okay, it's now 7:17 according to me. Let's get back online at 7:20. To you, Jen.
All right, thank you, Chair Bell. I was just answering in terms of, you know, what is this proposal in terms of housing options? So I guess in terms of where developments are, where do we build? So we build on fields, greenfield areas. So DGA it's called, where it's our big, huge subdivisions. What do they build? They build 70% single detached. They throw in some townhomes to meet density requirements. They do some condo blocks, and that's what we get. In terms of other proposals, we work with a lot of developers who do intensification, infill. So they take a lot, they build different things, or they do fourplexes. Those are the tools, though, that the province is really looking at. They're looking at taking existing things, adding more units to existing homes or existing buildings. But then also there's not much in terms of how they're actually changing the density requirements in new greenfield subdivisions. So those are some of the things in that rural proposal. In terms of the questions that are at the bottom, it says, what kind of flexibility is needed to address housing needs in your rural municipality? So those are some of the things that we actually can answer. And we do have some really good ideas for that. So those are some of the things. But however, there's nothing in the proposal about inclusionary zoning, affordability, rent control, poverty levels, or even our actual trailer parks and how to make those actually permanent. There's nothing in there. So those are also some of the things that we can ensure that are sort of commented on and make sure that rural municipalities are not left out. So I hope that answers your question. And the next piece is, what do we do about our official plan? This is the burning question. So as I ponder my career, no, but so I guess the biggest thing is Pam and I met with MMH London on Monday, and they had actually a great quote. It says, what is the county's tolerance of risk for taking no action or taking action? If we don't do anything right now, even for the 6 months, what is our tolerance for risk for doing that? They said that we can proceed, but again, do we take that risk? So what is the county's tolerance of risk? And that is what you as a council need to decide. And we are probably proposing bringing forward a report in May to policy committee to outline those factors. And by then the writ will have dropped and we will know if we will have had comments by then. If we don't get comments by the end of April, we are not getting comments. And unfortunately, it's not looking that positive at the moment. That's sort of the indication that we have been given. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with. There's absolutely no indication about the conformity date to the growth plan, July 1st. There's no indication that will be changing. So we're waiting to hear about that. If the province can do Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone, Royal Assent before that, we'll have to see. The proposal from last Wednesday is only first reading. They have to go through second reading and Royal Assent in the next 3.5 weeks. So we'll see how that goes. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor House.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Ferrier, then Councillor Chambers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Places to grow, more homes, more choice, more homes for everyone. We've had so many changes to the benefit of the development industry in terms of the provincial policy statement, which you see sprinkled throughout our package tonight. You know, it does conform to the provincial policy statement, et cetera, is kind of tying the hands of local municipalities. Jen, I was really disappointed to hear that things that create deep affordability, much like the other paper we had received last planning meeting, things like public housing, co-op housing, rent geared to income apartments with public control over rental rates, public senior and long-term care housing, inclusionary zoning, trailer parks, tiny encased housing, that these are not really dealt with in this bill. And I note that these are all still built at a profitable rate for developers, builders, tradespeople. Like they're not losing out when we create more of these. They're actually gaining some still. But I want to touch on the piece about funding for the OLT, because I think to the average person listening, they would say, hey, that sounds good. That's like a court process. It's a tribunal. But really, that's a process as it stands now that the backlog actually slows growth on controversial applications. It gives municipalities like ours time to negotiate settlements that are to the benefit of current citizens. And putting money into that process, which more often than not tends to favor the current and future provincial policy statements, tends to favor development and developers. Putting money into there instead of, say, affordable and public housing seems to be a misnomer. So there's nowhere in there where they talk about increasing funds or developer access to funds for any of those deeply affordable options.
Do you have a response, Jen?
Through Chair Bell to Councillor Laferriere, that is correct. There is really not much in terms of inclusionary zoning and those other tools. However, it is up to the municipality, and we have provided quite a few of them in our new OP. It's just that this legislative piece is not really touching upon that. They have actually provided that one piece. It's correspondence on the actual attachments. Number 8, it says financing for not-for-profit housing providers. So it's actually a bit of a model in terms of regulatory, in terms of some affordability, but that's really the only proposal that's in there at this time. But in terms of the OLT funding, I know that we have our county council, Jody's on the line. I don't know if she has any further thoughts about the funding to the OLT, but I know that even for cases that she is working on the county's behalf, there is quite a backlog right now, and they're booking hearings into late 2023 in terms of that. And whether $19 million is just a drop in the bucket, I mean, it's not that much money, but I know that they don't have a lot of caseworkers and actually adjudicators, so that's probably what the money is going into.
I wonder if with the with the official plan, I wonder if any wording about those deeply affordable options that are in our official plan that we want to have approved, if that could be in some of the correspondence to the ministry staff, because I think that's already in line. We've already agreed as a community and a council that those are good things, that there are many different tools that we could use. And it's interesting to me the way it was worded about, you know, we're giving you tools to build more and faster and you're not using them, but we are still building quite a bit, and we want other tools to be more accessible, like these ones that create deeper affordability. And I wonder if that would be something that makes a lot of sense to go into a letter or to the correspondence with the ministry. That's all I have, but thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I guess through you to Jennifer, you may wish to comment on what I'm going to comment on, and we'll go from there. You had mentioned that the pendulum swings back and forth over the years, and you've been around a while, and I've been around a while, and we've seen these pendulums swing back and forth. And I am of the opinion that the pendulum has now swung to a point where Brant County can take incredible advantage of where it's at in terms of rural development. Brant County is a little bit different than many municipalities that make up the planning regime and the provincial policies. For example, the city of Brantford is much different in its makeup than the county of Brant. The county of Brant has some urban areas and a huge swath of rural area, and the planning regimes in the immediate past have really impacted the rural parts of our county as it has the rural parts of other counties. It's odd that we complain about the growth in our urban areas to the point where we want to tap the brakes and make great hay about tapping the brakes and slowing down development, which is contrary to the impetus of what the province is trying to do with regard to solving the housing crisis, which is a shortage. And I'm not going to get political, and I'm not going to, I'll leave it to everybody else to decide whether the philosophy of the province now is good or bad. But while we're tapping the brakes on growth in the urban areas, maybe we should be looking at the rural areas and see what we're doing there. And you'll reflect back upon some of the comments I made, such as in the village of Scotland, for example. That's not uncommon in the villages and the small towns and the rural areas and hamlets throughout rural Ontario. And maybe Brant County can, we're not going to solve the provincial housing crisis, but maybe what we can do is use the tools that are available to us to help Brant County in terms of making our communities sustainable, because the previous planning regimes have been hard on rural areas. The item number 5, they're asking for comments on the housing needs in rural communities. If you look at the document that the proposal that they put forth to comment on, here's a couple policy planks in that document that we want to comment on, and just compare this to what we are actually doing in our official plan. One of the comments is we should allow appropriate development in areas without full municipal sewer and water. That is contrary to what our official plan suggests. And that has a huge impact on villages and hamlets in the rural area. Here's another one. Clarify that residential development on rural lands is permitted. Our official plan discourages that. Maybe we are a little bit too far to the pendulum side of the previous regimes, and maybe we should move more to the current pendulum position to make our rural communities sustainable. Because if, in my opinion, and in many others' opinion, if we keep going the way we're going, the rural communities will not be sustainable. And we see that every time you drive from here to, if you take a drive, go through Princeton, Burford, Scotland, Glenmore, all the villages, they are, I'll go back to recall what I said about Scotland, and it's not alone. So I'm not going to cry and whine about the province being hard on us about putting policies in place to make it difficult for us, because I think they're putting policies in place that we can use specifically in Brant County for Brant County and make Brant County a better place for people to live and to be housed. And maybe, as I said, we're not going to solve the provincial housing crisis here in Brant County with our official plan or any other plan for that matter. But I think we need to take a little bit of time and effort and thought in our planning processes and planning regime and planning policies to take advantage of what's out there for us to make our rural communities more sustainable and our rural county more sustainable. So that's my position and that's my rant. And I'm not being critical of our planning staff. I'm not being critical of the council, but we need to do a little bit better job in planning in rural areas. Urban planning is different entirely than rural planning. And we're not an urban municipality. We are a rural municipality with urban areas. And the cookie cutter approach that the province wants us to do, maybe we shouldn't keep trying to do that. Maybe we should use an approach to help Brant County. And I've seen, as Jennifer mentioned, the pendulum swings back and forth. We went through the Greenbelt area. We went through there's all kinds of different things. It changes with the government and it changes within the government. So, and I don't mean to rag the puck here, but I just don't want to just send off something. I want to use what's available to us and put a little thought to this rather than just take 5 minutes here at this meeting and then close the book and then watch the communities deteriorate before our very eyes when we have an opportunity to make them better.
Jennifer, I don't know whether you want to respond to any of that, but thank you to Councillor Chambers for that input.
Yeah, I can add a few things to that. Thank you, Chair Bell, to Councillor Chambers. I absolutely agree. There's, if you have any reading that you haven't done, this policy proposal that's attached to the report, seeking feedback on housing needs in rural and northern municipalities, this is one of the most important pieces if you could read. As Councillor Chambers talked about, there's actually some pieces in there. So from what we heard from MMEH yesterday, we surmise that this is going to be the policy proposal, not seeking feedback with legislative changes, either before or after the election. These are potentially changes that are going to be in the growth plan. So the province is probably going to change the growth plan after the election if the Conservative gets in. And these are some of the things, because right now the growth plan is fairly constrictive. I mean, we've applied the growth plan, and that's unfortunately what we were seeking feedback from the province through our comments. So this is actually a tweak, because I think they've realized they are being a little too restrictive, especially in small rural municipalities. So these proposals are actually a change they are suggesting, if you read between the lines, to the growth plan, which is fair for rural and northern municipalities, because again, it is a very urban-centric Toronto plan. So those are some of the things. And if you look through that proposal, it's talking about, the province told us no more rural residential lots. Sorry, it's over. So that's what we've applied. Well, now they're actually through this proposal saying, you know what, we're sort of maybe changing our mind on that. So can we have your feedback on that? Things like that. And also in terms of rural settlements with no servicing, growth plan's pretty clear, very limited, minor rounding out. So is there a different proposal? So thank you, Councillor Chambers. I very much appreciate those comments. And then as we propose to potentially bring a report to committee in May. We were supposed to do that in February, but bring different options for our rural settlements to solve the issues that we're trying to deal with in terms of the boundaries, underlying zoning, that's restrictive development, minor rounding out issues. So those are some of the things that we are bringing forward for council's options. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. Anybody else wish to speak to the Councillor Gatwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with many of Councillor Chambers' comments, and certainly during the OP process, we had a lot of requests in the Oak Hill area specifically, since it's so close to the city, and there was some housing granted in that area, but other areas were shut out. And I don't know whether we talk about complete communities, and I can recall a lady on Etherington Place in Oak Hill saying, there's no stores out here. There's no place where you can walk to buy a quart of milk or a loaf of bread. So maybe if we're going to look at that area again, it needs to be more complete so that we can include some walkability and some conveniences for the homes that all these developers want to build out there. So that's my say. Thank you.
I can respond to that through Chair Bell to Councillor Gatwood. We're actually in touch with the two other large landowners next to the landowner that was granted a minor rounding out. So we are in touch. Actually, we just had some communication with both of them in the last week. So those are things that, you know, could be brought forward again. I mean, we're not at our final, we're still at a draft stage. So we'll see what happens with the proposals, but we were going for council's direction because they wanted the whole parcels in with the large acreage, but it's something that can be brought back and for further review.
Just a point of order. I just got a text from Councillor Bell that his computer had an issue and Councillor Miller is the vice chair.
Okay, my froze up as well too for a few minutes there, but okay, well, we'll keep going. Jennifer, we'll let you finish and then we'll go
on. Thank you, Chair Miller. That's all I had to say for that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Chambers next.
Just one final comment, David, and that's this. The great tragedy will be if we approve an official plan that is based on previous policy and the landscape is shifting under our feet as we speak. And if the provincial policies change, our document, our official plan will be out of sync with the new regime. And that is something that I'll leave planning staff to wrestle with, but I really have great fear that our official plan, if the regime changes as it's being proposed and maybe being suggested, will be our planning document, which dictates the planning policy in Brant County for the next 5 years, will be a restrictive document out of sync with what may be the current provincial policies, which would be the policies that may be more favorable to Brant County as a rural municipality. Just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bell, are you ready to pick it up?
Yeah, I am. Sorry for that. My computer literally died in front of me, so I switched to another machine. So thank you for taking over, David. Appreciate it. I think when I left it, Jen was still answering questions, but would anybody else like to ask, answering questions, I think, to Councillor Gatwood. Anybody else like to ask questions of Jen? If not, I have a couple of comments. One is that my reading of what I saw was this will have quite an impact on our planning staff. I saw deadlines being imposed and penalties associated with failure to meet deadlines that puts quite a lot of pressure on our planning staff. And I think in a brief conversation I had with Matt Vaughan, we're in a struggle already to get the planning staff that we need. So this will put quite some pressure on the organization. The second comment I have is that, as we approach a municipal election later in the year, I think it's worth the message going out to our electorate that the degree to which the province is taking control of planning matters is increasing if this legislation goes forward. And it was a hot topic, it was a real hot button, at least for the councillors of Paris and for the mayor himself at the last election. And I think it is important that as we communicate what's happening here, that the general public is aware of the shift in control and the authority that we have. To the degree that if you read between the lines, it's almost a statement that county councillors, municipal councillors can't be trusted in these planning decisions. And that I think was pretty much the message that I took from this. And I hope that many people are listening to this committee meeting, and if not, then we do need to get that message out stronger. I had one comment on Councillor Chambers' input, which I thought was very thoughtful and very helpful. And I think it does offer an opportunity. We should never fail to look for silver linings on what appear to be dark clouds. But what came to mind as I was listening to Councillor Chambers was the multi-density property in Burford on Maple Avenue. There's a real opportunity for us to go, between the challenges that we have in urban communities and the demands of keeping and sustaining rural communities. There was an opportunity. There is an opportunity there. And I think that we as a council need to think very carefully about that, and also to recognize that will be one of the first tests of, do we really want to grow our rural communities? Jen, I think if there's no other comments, I'm going to say thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I think there's some work for staff to do. I think Mayor Bailey undertook that together with Councillor Chambers, he would try to work together with SCORE to represent a wider community. So thank you, Jen, do appreciate it. I think at the same time, I think we do need to receive for information the communication on 13.1. Councillor Leferrier moving, Councillor Howe seconding. All those in favour to receive, thank you. That brings us to other business, which I think there was none. And we now then need to move into an in-camera session. Would somebody like to move us in camera? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Pearce, all those in favour? I leave it now to Alicia to move us into an in-camera session.
You're muted, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I think Brian has left us. I think we're the last item on the agenda. Unless there's anybody wishes to bring anything forward for the betterment of the county. Seeing none, then I'll move to adjourn this meeting, and we will meet again as committee on May the 3rd. Thank you for your time this evening.
May the 3rd, my birthday.
Drinks on John.
Good night, all.